On a summer afternoon in 2008, in the bustling streets of Akihabara, Tokyo, Japan, where the fast-paced rhythm of life never slows down, strangers continue to pass each other by, each absorbed in their own busy world. But in just a few short minutes, a horrifying nightmare struck, causing the neighborhood to be engulfed in loud screams. Many people tried to run away, and less fortunate people had to collapse right in the middle of the street. When everything seemed to calm down, 7 people were gone forever. Dozens of others were left with both physical and mental wounds. This tragic incident shocked the press, media, and the entire country of Japan. So what happened that day? Who is behind this tragedy? Let's go back in time with us to better understand this tragic case. Akihabara is known as a symbol of modern Japanese culture. When mentioned in this neighborhood, people immediately imagine rows of houses filled with neon lights, electronics stores close together, and countless bustling maid cafes where maids in cute outfits welcome customers with bright smiles. Not only that, this is also a paradise of otaku, people who are passionate about anime, manga, and video games, because wherever they go they can easily see shops selling character models, rare game desks, or even the most modern VR spaces. But no matter how brilliant, Akihabara still has a hidden corner, a place for lonely people, those who quietly walk among the crowd without anyone paying attention. Here, there are people who came to escape reality, to escape social pressures, including Tomohiro Kato. It is known that Tomohiro Kato was born in September 28, 1982, in the peaceful suburb of Omori, Japan, in a middle-class family with a position in society. Tomohiro's father is a senior manager in the financial industry, a prestigious and stressful job that always considers success as the only measure of human value, while his mother is an extremely sharp woman. She always spends all her time taking care of her 2 sons and always wants them to be better than others to bring glory to the family. And in fact, Tomohiro's early years reflected that expectation. An elementary school boy isn't only talented but also has the qualities of an excellent athlete. His grades are always at the top, and on the sports field, he is also a shining star. That makes most of his friends and teachers remember him as an agile, intelligent, and always enthusiastic Tomohiro in everything. However, behind these remarkable achievements is a gloomy picture of the Kato family, where Tomohiro not only grew up, but also silently endured pressure and pain that no one understood. When in the eyes of his parents, 9 points are never enough, only 10 points are worthy. If Tomohiro made even the smallest mistake in his homework, his mother would rip out the entire page, forcing her son to start over. Not only Tomohiro, his younger brother Yuji also has to live in his brother's shadow with fear. For her, one mistake is one punishment. Every small mistake is evidence of weakness, an insult to family honor. Not only that, family meals are inherently a time for members to gather, but for Tomohiro, it is a stressful battle because if he eats slowly, the food will be thrown straight to the floor by his mother, and he will be forced to bend down to pick it up to continue eating. It didn't stop there. If Tomohiro accidentally answered a math problem incorrectly while chewing, the bowl of rice in his hand could be snatched away, and immediately afterward, he was dragged straight to the cold water bath, where his young face was pressed down without a word of mercy. But he soon understood these things and kept trying in the hope that one day he could receive recognition from his parents. Therefore, when entering middle school, Tomohiro always maintained good results, even becoming president of the tennis club. But this still didn't make his parents recognize his efforts and be less harsh on him. From here on, the cracks in Tomohiro's soul began to appear, causing him not only no longer be the happy boy he was before, but gradually become hot-tempered, easily exploding with negative emotions. And then, he began to find a way to escape from that stuffy house. He wandered the streets in the evenings without stopping, but no matter how far he goes, he still has to return to his mother's cold control, still having to bow to her harsh demands. But all of that still didn't make Tomohiro give up. He proved his excellence to his parents by passing the entrance exam to Omori High School, a prestigious school, one of the top in Japan. But the pressure from his family was still a maze that was difficult to escape. The psychological breakdown caused Tomohiro's academic performance to plummet when he was always the best in the past. But now he's just a mediocre person. Worse yet, Tomohiro is no longer the center of attention, no longer the admiring eyes of teachers or friends. On the contrary, he became the object of ridicule and verbal violence. Some classmates have said that they always see Tomohiro wandering alone in the schoolyard with lost eyes, and even rumors that he often carries a knife with him. No one knows how true it is, but it shows that his image in the eyes of his friends is gradually becoming scary. And this is also the beginning of Tomohiro's dark future. From an excellent student expected to become a talented automobile engineer, he fell into an irreversible abyss. In 2000, when the university entrance exam ended, the score reports was like a fatal knife piercing the pride he had tried to build for so long. He did not get into Takedo University in the major his family expected. For many people, failing college is simply a temporary failure, a milestone for them to try harder in the future. But for Tomohiro, this is more than just an exam result. It is also evidence of the collapse of a life, and most importantly, the trust his mother placed in him. After hearing the news, she slammed the grade book on the table and shouted harsh words that Tomohiro probably won't forget for the rest of his life. "You humiliate me in front of everyone." Her voice was sharp and cold. Then his father's scolding sounded again. "You don't deserve to be my child." Even that night, he was forced to stand outside in the snow for hours like a criminal, without a coat, without anyone to protect him. Only his feet were numbed, his white breath mixed with the cold air. Sometime later, he applied to study at an auto mechanics training school in Akihabara, Tokyo, because if he couldn't design futuristic cars, maybe he could repair them. Here, he tried to accept reality, and luck also smiled on him. In 2005, Tomohiro got a job in a truck factory in Tokyo, hoping that he could finally be independent, able to prove his worth. But life in the capital is not easy. Wages are low, prices are expensive, and gradually the money he earns is not enough to sustain himself. With each passing day, Tomohiro felt like he was just a tiny screw in a giant machine, anonymous, meaningless, and suffocated by irresistible pressures. He began to sink into debt. Every day going to work is a torture. He no longer felt like a human being, just a moving corpse, working by inertia, living without any purpose. And his family, who should have been his last support, didn't care at all, didn't ask a single word, and no one needed to know how he left. So next, what will you do? End it all? Sweep the whole world into your rage? Punish those who hurt you? Or is there still another way? A way out that is not tinged with hatred? In the end, Tomohiro chose to end his life. Late one night in 2006, he quietly borrowed an old truck from the company he worked for, then rushed towards the concrete wall at top speed to end it all. But, ironically, the collision was not enough to send him out of this world. Tomohiro still survived, suffering only a few superficial wounds and a brief bout of dizziness. As it turned out, even death rejected him. Thought Tomohiro would intend to commit suicide again, but no, he got up and got stronger. This time he was lucky enough to be recruited by Kanto Motor Industry Company, a company in the Japanese automobile industry with a salary that is considered enough to live and cover personal living expenses. For Tomohiro, he always felt very grateful to the company for giving him a good job, so he rushed to work like a machine, quietly disciplined and hardworking, thanks to which his labor contract was also extended for another year. However, outside of work, Tomohiro is completely isolated from society. He has no friends, no relatives to confide in, no one to hold on to when he feels empty and can only vent his anger, loneliness, and indignation on anonymous online forums. However, not many people cared, but instead there was only ridicule and ignorance, making him briefly think, maybe I'm being too negative. Thinking of this, he gently closed his eyes, took a deep breath and sighed, as if he wanted to relieve himself of a burden, and told himself to find a way to lead a brighter life. But then in early June 2008, suddenly the company Kanto Motor Industry he was working for announced that it would cut staff, leaving only 50 of the 200 temporary workers remaining, making him worried that his job would be lost. And on the next day of work, when entering the locker room, Tomohiro realized that his uniform was gone. Immediately he thought, I'm fired, and began to lose control. He banged on the closet door, shouted at his colleagues, screamed to get his uniform back, but no one knew what was going on, until when they ran to find their boss, Tomohiro had disappeared and never returned to the company again. In the days that followed, no one knew where Tomohiro went or what he did. Some of his followers on social media said that he went online and posted a resentful status. I have no friends and never will have friends. I'm ignored because I'm ugly. If I had a girlfriend, I wouldn't have quit my job or been addicted to my phone. I'm worse than trash, because at least trash is recycled. And yet, on June 8, 2008, a somewhat confusing post appeared on his personal page. I'm used to playing the role of a good guy. People are too easily fooled. It's time. Let's go. Ultimately, what is Tomohiro planning? Are those vague words just idle thoughts? Or do they hide a terrifying plan behind them? Do not take your eyes off the screen, because what's about to happen will shock you. At exactly 12:33 a.m. on June 8, 2008, while life was still going on in a hurry in the Akihabara neighborhood, when Tomohiro's mysterious disappearance was still a question mark, suddenly from a distance, a strange white truck appeared. In the rush towards the intersection, despite the bright red lights and the loud sirens, the car still did not slow down, and a second later, the sound of a terrifying collision happened. Screams pierced the air. A girl in a blue dress fell down with a long trail of blood on the sidewalk, her eyes still wide open, as if she had not yet understood what just happened. A middle-aged man was thrown away, hit hard against a light pole, his body twisted painfully, and a few people and a young man, probably just out of university, were lying motionless with blood splattered on his chest. The whole neighborhood suddenly turned into a pile of chaos. Some people ran away, some people collapsed from shock, some people cried and called out the names of their loved ones. It seemed like just a normal traffic accident, but a few minutes later, a strange man came out of the truck and stared at the chaos with a cold expression. Without any explanation, without a second of hesitation, he shouted, then pulled out a shining knife from his coat and rushed into the crowd. The blade swung in the midway summer sunlight, piercing through the fabric, causing a woman to scream in pain and collapse in the middle of the street, and a few other people also died here. When the attack happened, the nearest police station was less than 300 meters away. Some panicked witnesses quickly pulled out their phones to call emergency services, their trembling voices screaming in despair. Someone drove a car into the crowd. He has a knife. Help us! Very quickly, the police arrived at the scene. Before their eyes was a horrifying scene. Bodies lying everywhere, blood splattered on the road, and a man holding a knife still stained with blood. Without hesitation, a police officer pulled out his baton and rushed straight towards the attacker. Pop! A huge blow landed directly on his head. But strangely, the man was almost unresponsive, as if he didn't feel any pain, forcing the police to pull out their guns. And at that moment, the murderer stopped, slowly dropped the knife, and raised his hand. Finally, he was controlled and escorted to the station for investigation to clarify the incident. At this time, the identity of that cold-blooded man was determined. was none other than Tomohiro Kato. But is this really the spontaneous action of a loner? Or maybe Tomohiro was using stimulants? Or was he planning it all along? During an in-depth interview with prosecutors, Tomohiro Kato did not protest or deny his crime. On the contrary, he calmly admitted everything, even seemed willing to explain what he had done, as if he had been waiting for an opportunity to say what was in his heart. When asked about the motive for the crime, Tomohiro did not hesitate to list three main reasons, all of which revolved around the hatred and resentment he had for himself and the world around him. First was the extreme disappointment in himself. He used to be a capable student, loved by his teachers and friends, but over time, he felt like he had become a failure, without the career he wanted, without a future, without a place in society. In particular, from high school, he began to realize that no matter how hard he tried, he still could not meet his mother's harsh expectations. However, if that was all, he probably wouldn't have gone to the end. What really rushed Tomohiro over the edge was a series of mounting disappointments, including one that led him to believe he had lost his job. But the fact that Kanto Motor Industry never fired him, it was all just a deduction of a person falling into despair. It was not simply a misunderstanding, but clearly reflected his psychology at that time. A person who was gradually losing the ability to distinguish between reality and the fears in his mind. In addition to self-disappointment, another factor contributing to this tragedy is loneliness. Tomohiro believes that if he had a girlfriend, things would have been different. Because of all that resentment, Tomohiro decided to end it all and take revenge on the society that was cold and insensitive to her. And it seemed he couldn't let that thought slip away. So on June 6, Tomohiro Kato walked into a weapons store and meticulously selected 6 sharp daggers, a pair of black leather gloves, and a special baton, all wrapped up in a bale worth 35,000 yen. To others, it might have been a simple transaction, but to Tomohiro, this was the beginning of a long-standing plan. Each item is not just a tool, but also a symbol of determination, a silent declaration of war against the world he hates. And yet, just one day after buying the weapon, Tomohiro continued to carry out the next step in his plan. He sold his computer, phone, and what little personal property he had left. Each item disappeared from his hands, as if severing all ties to his old life, to any glimmer of hope that remained. And with little money from that transaction, Tomohiro went to a truck rental company and chose a 5-ton vehicle. On the paperwork, he filled in the purpose of renting a car to move from his house. A smooth lie. No one suspected, but in reality, he has no intention of moving anywhere. Until the early morning of June 8, Tomohiro posted a status line on social networks with the intention of ending it all. "I'm used to playing the role of a good man." That is, he admitted that all these years he had lived in the shell of a normal person, trying to fit in, trying not to reveal his inner despair. But now, he's fed up of maintaining that image. Then, in the end, Tomohiro concluded with an "okay, let's go," which confirmed that he had nothing left to hesitate, and started to get in the car and rush towards the most crowded place of Akihabara neighborhood, starting a massacre. After hearing the whole truth, prosecutors were extremely indignant at Tomohiro's barbaric actions, but also expressed deep sadness at Tomohiro's tragic and turbulent life. He was not born a murderer, but fate and negative thoughts led him to the evil path of society. But no matter what, he must pay the price for his brutal actions. Tomohiro's formal trial quickly took place on January 20, 2009 at the Tokyo District Court. Here, the defense attorney tried to argue that he suffered from cognitive impairment, unable to fully understand the severity of what he had done. But that's not enough to cover up the truth. Psychological experts conducted an assessment and concluded Tomohiro was fully aware of his actions. He was not a lunatic, did not suffer from paranoia or hallucinations, but he acted purposefully, had a clear plan, and must be held responsible before the law. And then, After lengthy trials with many controversies, on March 24, 2011, the Tokyo High Court announced the final verdict. Tomohiro Kato, the man who spread terror in the heart of Akihabara, was officially sentenced to death for first-degree murder and attempted first-degree murder, awaiting execution. After long years of detention, a series of appeals rejected, and with no other way out, on a cold morning on July 26, 2012, Tomohiro Kato quietly entered the execution room at Tokyo prison. There was no resistance, no plea for forgiveness. He just bowed his head as the noose was placed around his neck. In the last moments of his life, no one was present next to Tomohiro, including his immediate family. Perhaps, as throughout his life, he came and went in absolute solitude. But blood debt must be paid with blood, which is justice. That bloody massacre claimed the lives of 7 innocent people. Katsuhiko Nakamura, 70 years old, Miyamoto, 21 years old, Fujinu Kazaran, Kawaguchi Takahiro, Koiwaka Zahiro, Miyamoto Noki, and Matsui Mitsubishi. They passed away suddenly, leaving an unfillable void in the hearts of their families and loved ones. The death sentence for Tomohiro Kato may not be able to erase the pain, but at least it is a part of justice for the unjust souls. And after the sentence was carried out, Japanese media quickly reported it. For many, it was a worthy ending, but there are also people who express their sadness when looking deeper into this tragedy, about a child who once had a future, had opportunities, but was then swallowed up by isolation and hatred. As for Tomohiro's family, they could not avoid being severely affected. Although his parents repeatedly apologized and even compensated the victims' families, they still had to receive great criticism from public opinion. On online forums, harsh comments about Tomohiro's parents appeared abundantly. No one is born a murderer, so who turned him into a wild animal? I don't think I need to look any further. It's his family. Did they ever truly love him in his whole life? Or did they just teach him to hate everything? Hate does not just stop at words online. The Kato family quickly became the target of threatening phone calls, cursed letters, and scornful looks from neighbors. However, the most painful thing that the Kato family had to endure was the death of Yuji Kato, Tomohiro's younger brother, just 6 years after the massacre in February 2014. Yuji took his own life. He was also a happy young man with a stable job, but the harshness of his family was so great that he pushed Yuji to a tragic fate like his own brother. Also, after the departure of their only son, Tomohiro's parents also divorced and officially broke up. His mother even collapsed to the point of having to be hospitalized in a mental hospital with no one around to take care of her. Tomohiro Kato's father, once a senior manager in the financial sector, could not escape the consequences of Kato's horrifying crime and the painful passing of his youngest son, so he resigned from his job and lived alone in his old house. Some neighbors said that at night, his house never turned on the lights. There are only flickering candles behind the window and the silhouette of a man sitting in the darkness of guilt and shame. Perhaps in the end, they also realized the mistakes in the way they raised their children. But so what? Everything is now just ashes of the past. Too late to repair, too late to save, and too late to change the fate that has been arranged. The Akihabara massacre has ended. It not only left behind a horrifying haunting, but also raised a series of questions about human psychology, society, and how we raise the young generation. Is Tomohiro Kato really just a social misfit, acting out of his own desperation? Or is this the consequence of a living environment lacking understanding, where marginalized people have no choice but to indulge in hatred? And yet, Tomohiro's story is also a terrifying warning about the people left behind, those wandering in the darkness, quietly resenting the whole world. How many other Tomohiro exist, invisible to our eyes, waiting for a moment to vent their pent-up anger? And above all, this is also a bitter lesson about family. A born child does not choose who to become. It is the upbringing, love, or indifference of adults that will determine its path. When a child goes astray, the responsibility, not only the child's own, but also the reflection of those who gave birth and raised the child. We can be angry at crime, but what is more important is to look at ourselves, how to avoid fostering another tragedy, how to avoid having more people abandoned in life. So the case ends here, a story full of tragedy, loss, and valuable lessons. Thank you for watching until the last moment. See you again in the next stories, where we together uncover the mystery of haunted cases.